Hey, it's Matt Baum. So, what is the Supreme Court thinking about marriage? They just heard oral argument from gay couples who want to get married, from the states that want to preserve their marriage bans, and from the US government, and we can make a couple of guesses about what's going through the justices' heads. First, a few basics. There are 9 justices, and conventional wisdom has it that there are 4 who are probably sympathetic to marriage equality, 4 who are probably opposed, and 1 who's probably in the middle. The ones who are opposed are really opposed, starting with Scalia, who said that marriage equality is a requirement of action which is unpalatable to many of our citizens for religious reasons. In other words, he's saying that marriage equality would require ministers to preside over weddings they don't approve of. But of course, that's ridiculous. Yeah, there are non-discrimination laws that require businesses to treat everyone equally, but Scalia's mixing up non-discrimination laws and the First Amendment, which protects private religious acts. Religious officials are free to choose who to associate with in private, but this case is about the government, and the government, which has to represent everyone, can't just choose to leave certain people out. Justice Roberts also seemed to be coming down against marriage equality. He said, "You're not seeking to join the institution, you're seeking to change what the institution is. The fundamental core of the institution is the opposite-sex relationship, and you want to introduce into it a same-sex relationship." This is also ridiculous. Now, I don't know much about straight couples, but I'm pretty sure they don't give Valentine's Day cards that say, "My favorite thing about you is your gender." If we're talking about the fundamental core of marriage, there's more to a relationship than just gender. But the states are still clinging to this idea that marriage has to be about the ability to reproduce. According to John Birch, he's the attorney for the states, granting marriage equality would mean that marriage and children no longer have anything to do with each other. And if gay couples are allowed to marry, then we would have more children outside of marriage. In other words, gay marriage makes straight couples have random babies? Okay, sure, that's the same line of reasoning that the anti-gay side used 2 years ago in the Windsor case. And how did that work out for him? Not so well. Only Thomas and Alito signed on to that reasoning, and the other 7 didn't buy it. Speaking of Alito, during this most recent argument, he brought up polygamy as a reason to deny marriage equality. He essentially asked, if we're going to let gays and lesbians get married, why not groups of people? Okay, this question comes up a lot, and it can be a tough one to answer. But the easiest response is that plural marriage is just a lot more complicated, so it's a bigger shift than letting gays and lesbians get married. For example, if there's a divorce, do remaining spouses get child custody? Or if there's a disagreement about medical care, which spouse has the authority to make the decision? These are questions that could be answered, of course, but they're just not at issue in this case. In part, that's because polygamy is just as heterosexual as it is queer. You could easily say, doesn't straight marriage lead to polygamy? And that's why straight couples shouldn't be allowed to get married. I mentioned Thomas a minute ago. Here's what he had to say during oral argument. Okay, he didn't say anything, but he has written things. Back in February, Justice Thomas wanted the Supreme Court to prevent marriage from starting in Alabama, writing that they should have preserved the status quo. And although he didn't say that during oral argument, or in fact say anything at all, Mary Bonato, arguing for the LGBT couples, did have an opportunity to respond to the whole status quo thing. The effect of waiting is not neutral. There are consequences to waiting. People get hurt. There are ramifications that affect everything from birth certificates to child custody to driver's licenses to death certificates. Look at what preserving the status quo really means. Couples separated in hospitals, losing their marriage license when they cross state lines, losing their home or their life savings when one of them passes away, having to spend thousands on adoptions because the state won't recognize one of the parents. That's what Thomas wants to preserve? Maybe that's why he kept quiet in court. It sounds pretty terrible when you say it out loud. Those 4 justices, Scalia, Thomas, Roberts, and Alito, are probably going to rule against the freedom to marry. On the other side, we have Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who did not let the state's attorney get away with anything. When he said that letting gay and lesbian couples marry would hurt the state's ability to encourage heterosexual marriage, she said, "How could that be? You're not taking anything away from heterosexual couples." Justice Kagan agreed. It's hard to see how permitting same-sex marriage discourages people from bonding with their biological children. Sotomayor jumped in as well, saying, "How does withholding marriage from one group increase the value to the other group?" It's a good question. Birch stammered at first and tried to avoid it. Eventually, Scalia gave him a way out. "Do you even have to answer that question?" Scalia asked. "We don't," said Birch, and tried to change the subject. But Breyer wouldn't let him go. If we assume a basic purpose of marriage is to encourage an emotional and rearing bond between parents and children, allowing gay people to marry will weaken it? What's the empirical connection? That's what I have a problem with in your argument. In fact, Breyer gave several encouraging signs. One is that he called marriage a fundamental liberty, and that is a big, big deal. Because if a liberty is fundamental, it should extend to everybody. Sotomayor agreed. The right to marriage is embedded in our constitutional law. It is a fundamental right. Great, okay. Now tell Kennedy. Kennedy's the swing vote here. He's the one who'll probably decide this one way or the other. And he was hard to read. On one hand, he said, this definition has been with us for millennia. It's very difficult for the court to say, oh, well, we know better. He also said that marriage equality is so new, there's not enough social science to know its full effect. But on the other hand, he really let the state's attorney have it. When Bursch tried to claim that marriage should only be extended to couples who can procreate, Kennedy asked why procreation matters. Gay couples, he said, have a dignity that can be fulfilled. Bursch really screwed up at this point. He said that marriage was never supposed to bestow dignity, to which Kennedy said, I thought that was the whole purpose of marriage. Remember, over a decade ago, Kennedy wrote the majority decision in Lawrence, the case that overturned sodomy laws, about how the Constitution protects things like marriage and family and dignity. But Bursch stuck to his argument, saying that the dignity of marriage is just an accident, that marriage is really just about benefits and burdens. Mary Bonato, representing the couples, pounced on that, saying it represented an impoverished view of what is marriage. If ever there was a moment that may have nudged Kennedy to the side of equality, that was probably it. On one hand, you have gay couples saying that marriage bans deny them dignity. On the other hand, you have states saying that they aren't required to afford gay couples any dignity. And in the middle, you have the swing vote, a justice who already wrote a decision that dignity for gay couples is baked into the Constitution. So gee, how do you think it's going to go? But I have to say, my favorite moment came at the end of Mary Bonato's first round of argument. After debating whether marriage equality flows from the Constitution or from the states, she concluded by saying that this case isn't about courts versus states. It's about who gets to decide who you marry, the individual or the government. Perfect. Beautifully done. We have 2 months to go until the end of June. I can't wait. Hey, thanks for watching. As always, please do let me know what you think. I'm at Matt Baum on Twitter. And if you like this video, you might like some of my other projects. I do a weekly marriage equality news show called Marriage News Watch. You can subscribe over at marriagenewswatch.com. That'll keep you up to date on all the marriage cases before the Supreme Court and the dozens more happening around the country. I also make videos on this channel where I take complex issues affecting LGBTs and explain them in simple, fun terms, sometimes as a wizard, or as an adventurer, or as 3 out of 4 Golden Girls. You can go ahead and subscribe now to get new videos. And I have a podcast called The Sewers of Paris that's all about the entertainment that's changed the lives of gay men. Each week, a different guest opens up about the books, movies, music, and entertainment that made them who they are, revealing their hidden passions, secret struggles, and surprising triumphs. I've got some great episodes coming up about how music like Bjork and Tori Amos helped a man get back in touch with his dad, how musical theater was one kid's ticket off a small-town wheat farm, and what it was like growing up as the lone gay Star Trek nerd in a tiny gold mining town miles from civilization. You can subscribe over at sewersofparis.com, and as always, please let me know what you think about this video, about the podcast, or whatever's on your mind. I'm at Matt Baum on Twitter, or you can leave comments on this video. Thanks for watching. Hope to hear from you soon.